Never mind, the rest of us walked in late. All right, and we're ready to go. Heidi, can we start this meeting off with a roll call, determination of quorum?
Nordstrom.
Here.
Solomon.
Here.
Roberts. Here. Stroman. Here. Armstrong. Here. Jones.
Here, via phone.
Okay. Lehman.
Here.
Ham. Evans. Roseland. We have a quorum.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. Next up is the adoption of the agenda. Motion by Solomon, second by Stroman to adopt the agenda. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, it is adopted. Next, we have general public comment, a time for the members of the public to discuss or express concerns to the council on any issue not on the agenda. No items will be added to the agenda per state statute for special meetings, and I don't see any general public comment. So we're going to go ahead and close that off. Next, we have non-public hearing items 1 through 2 and non-consent items 1 through 2. Item number 1 is the mayor's budget presentation, and I'm going to turn the floor over to Mayor Allender.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for being here tonight. This is the presentation of the proposed 2023 budget. This is the budget process that was started 6 months or so ago, mostly by the finance department, the city finance director and assistant director, and preparing all of this. There's a software component to it with our city software that has to be all coordinated with city department heads, and then later on in the process we began to get the early estimates on revenue and making the early estimates on expenses. So there's a lot of work that goes into this. About, well, for me and my involvement, the majority of the work is in the final days or few weeks before the presentation. I do that to the great disappointment of the finance department because I choose to use the latest or the latest data available as far as some of the economic indicators and so on. Plus I have, as you can imagine, I have other duties. And so we're here tonight though, and this is the point where I present it to you formally, and following this meeting, this budget is all yours. It's yours to conduct hearings, ask questions, make changes, additions, subtractions, whatever you see fit. So I'm glad to have been involved in this process and glad to be here tonight to present it to you. So, getting started. First and foremost, I like to bring this up, is that we are operating here in pursuit of our city's core values, and this is what we pursue. We look at these when we're proposing major projects or changes to the way we do things, and this is kind of one of our guiding lights in city government. So a balanced pattern of growth. Well, as you can imagine, it's not been especially balanced in the last year or two. We pursue a balanced pattern of growth to manage chaos, to balance, to keep the balance of supply and demand, to help protect the availability of housing, durable goods, and consumables. It's a very delicate process, as we've all learned over the last couple of years, the supply chain and all that it encompasses. We also pursue this to protect and plan our infrastructure systems and to project resources needed to fulfill those needs into the future. Next is a vibrant, livable community. We do this to recognize and celebrate the part of life outside of work, to enhance the quality of life within our community. And I'm proud to be a part of a community that sets as one of its priorities doing things that will allow the citizens who fund us and who live here and who are our neighbors to have opportunities, whether they're economic or recreational or whatever they may be. But the quality of life is important for those community members. A safe, healthy, inclusive, and skilled community. Public safety is paramount in government, and that term used loosely or broadly means everything from police officers, firefighters, to efficient sewer and water systems and roadways and all that it encompasses. But you'll see in a few slides from now the priority that public safety has gotten in this community. Also, healthy lifestyles, skilled and diverse workers are essential for a healthy economy in a community like ours. Efficient transportation and infrastructure systems to provide a variety of travel modes: air, vehicular, bicycle, pedestrian, transit, and freight. We do this to maintain the systems to allow safe transport for goods and for people of all ages and mobility. Economic stability and growth. To diversify the economic base and provide alternatives to tourism. Tourism's great. It's what got us here. It's why we're on the map. But not everyone here works in the tourism industry. There are a number of other needs and opportunities that this community can be a part of, and I think that's what spells out economic stability and growth. Also, an emphasis on primary jobs and new business. Outstanding recreational and cultural opportunities. Our Greenway is a living tribute to those who were affected by the 1972 flood, and this legacy created by tragedy now serves to improve the lives of countless citizens and visitors alike. It is a living, breathing memorial. Also, a healthy community is a prosperous and a happy community. And so this is why this is one of our core values. And also, Rapid City has a rich Native American culture that should be acknowledged, celebrated, and shared. And finally, responsible, accessible, and efficient governance. Local government is the government that's closest to the people. We are neighbors with our constituents, and we shop with them, and we eat meals with them, and we go to baseball games with them, and we spend every day of our lives interacting with them. Government should be interactive and collaborative. Citizen leaders and legislators are accountable to the citizens. We have a responsibility to be fair and balanced in our approach to the community issues, and also a responsibility to balance city revenues and expenditures over the long term. We need to be working for sustainability and continuity of services and practicing responsible, accessible, and efficient governance. And that will allow us to achieve our goals. Next, some economic indicators. This is a little bit challenging this year because, as we know, we've experienced tremendous inflation. Costs of everything are up. There's a lot more spending, so that causes people like me, not an economist, but it causes people like me to look at the economic indicators with a little bit of a tilted head, wondering how much of this indicator is strictly from inflation and which ones are because of economic growth. So first we'll look at South Dakota's gross domestic product, the value of all products and services available within a time period. And we see here South Dakota's GDP has grown consistently, but it especially grew between 2020 and 2021. So things are looking up on that front. Rapid City's GDP has also grown, with the exception of 2020, but now we are back on track with pretty significant growth in 2021. So it's pretty safe to answer that question I posed earlier, how much is due to inflation or how much is due to growth? Well, you're not talking $1.5 billion in inflation, so I think this is a positive economic indicator. Average weekly wages in Rapid City, we've seen increase over time, some pretty substantial increases, and then a slowdown. And right now, we're experiencing a very small growth in average weekly wages in our community. Unemployment in Rapid City still hovering around 2.2, 2.3%. And keep in mind that unemployment is only the individuals in our community who are actively looking for employment. It does not count those who are not looking for employment, but still a very, very low number. Here's the Rapid City Regional Airport Enplanements. Now, these are a lot of numbers on one slide, and I apologize for that, but this is a very, it's kind of a telling picture of the traveling public. Prior to and leading up to 2019, Rapid City Regional Airport was breaking all of their own records for enplanements and activity at the airport. 2020 understandably caused a reduction in air travel, and 2021 showed a fairly good recovery. So now in 2022, we're still doing okay, but we are not on record pace for the first 6 months. But it's still a good amount of passengers boarding airplanes and using air travel. And this is a graph which goes by the month, so it shows, mainly it shows that our peaks are, as you would guess, around summertime, and then in the far right-hand side of that graph, we are just starting the peak into, it just shows through June, doesn't show any further. Rapid City general sales tax collections. On this particular chart, you will see 2020 and 2021, and those are actual numbers. 2022 and 2023, those are estimated numbers. So in 2021, for example, we did not project we were going to bring in $39 million in sales tax collections. It was much lower than that, so that's been adjusted now that we know what those numbers are. So all that taken into consideration in 2023, using the same very conservative methods of estimating future sales tax, we are estimating $41 million in 2023. The BBB tax revenue, this is affectionately called the Bed, Booze, and Board tax, but it's officially called the Gross Municipal Receipts tax. And this is a tax on lodging, restaurant food, entertainment, and this is an indicator of how many of our visitors and locals are spending at those type of establishments, and we see a fair amount of growth in the last couple of years. Building permit valuation is one of the old standbys for estimating economic activity within the community. And we see here in 2021, we fell just shy of $400 million in building valuations. So how are we doing so far this year? This slide shows the first 6 months of each year for the past several years, and it shows that in 2022 we are on course for a record year. We're at $262.5 million as of the first 6 months of 2022. These also, the building permits and everything related to that you're going to see here in terms of growth with water and sewer accounts and this sort of thing. This is all, people are really estimating rapid growth in Rapid City. And what we'll see here in the building services arena is that we will grow exactly according to how fast we can build. That's we and the other communities around us. And there are a limited number of contractors. There are more today than there probably have ever been, but there's a lot of building going on, but that's how fast we'll grow. Some of the challenges of growing is our demand for city services is growing as well. The Rapid City population growth. Every 10 years we have an official census count, and our official census count kind of reset our projections, and so we are still in Rapid City hovering around that 75,000 mark according to the census. There are varying opinions about us growing faster than that. Certainly the region is growing faster than that. In a 13-year period, we've added 2,667 single-family homes as of August 1st this year. And that is 280 in 2021, and that number is about 80 homes above the average. Typically, we would average around 200 homes a year. And then this year, year to date, 164. So we're still hanging in there with single-family homes. Multifamily units in that same 13-year stretch, 3,600, and 834 of those in 2021, 443 of those year-to-date 2022. So these are completed units. And just driving around town, I would venture a bet that there's at least 443 more that are going to come online in the next few to several months. There's a tremendous amount of construction on apartment units in Rapid City at the moment. Water production. We noted that from 2019 to 2020 we had used an additional 505 million gallons of water, and from 2020 to 2021 that number is 390 million additional gallons. Water taps installed, another way to just gauge our growth. We had a banner year in 2020 with 415, but this year, 2022, we've already matched, or I'm sure by this time beaten, the 2021 number of water taps. Water taps are one tap for each home, generally one tap for each apartment complex, unless they have a separate fire line. That could mean two taps, but these are our brand new water customers. Solid waste accounts going up, again a banner year in 2021, and we're at 131 as of August 1st this year. Utility bills used for solid waste disposal, that number has gone all the way from 7,000 tons in 2019 to 13,000 tons in 2021. So we're at about 7,500 tons of solid waste just from the utility bill being used as of August 1st. Tons of yard waste disposed of. 2020, when a lot of people were home, they got some stuff cleaned up. And 20,000 tons of yard waste in 2020, kept that pace through 2021, and it looks like we're going to be close to that pace in 2022. This is where I'm going to do my commercial for the material recovery facility and the landfill operations. And we have a tremendous volume of compost available. It is stacked up in large heaps and mounds, and landfill staff are ready and willing to load it into your truck or your dump truck or whatever you may have. The thing with this, over the last few years, the crew out there monitors the herbicide level. The herbicides now are at a level where it's not recommended for broadleaf plants, so that means you shouldn't use this in your garden or your flower beds at this point, but it's great for lawns. And so, in fact, it'll even keep your weeds down. And it's very inexpensive, and we have so much of it that I would encourage people to start thinking about using some compost on their lawns in the coming year. More challenges. The homeless population's growing. It grew substantially during 2020. It's kept a steady pace in its growth since that time, and that has brought about a greater need for human services. Emergency service employees are overworked because they are understaffed. There are difficulties hiring firefighters, paramedics, police officers. That's not the it's not the hiring scenario that it was in the older times where there were hundreds of applicants lined up for a few openings. So this staffing of these departments has gone very slow. The increased need for human service delivery. Our workforce is lean, and I would say we're really not even bordering on scarce anymore. It is scarce. It's scarce for the private sector, it's scarce for government. It's caused some alterations of service hours here at the city. It's caused for some workload issues and some scheduling issues, and so there doesn't appear to be any immediate cure on the horizon. So we're going to have to deal with this workforce scarcity issue going forward, and we're going to do the best we can. Community and political division still at this point, there's a lot of this going on. There's a lot of arguing about things, a lot of side-taking, and this makes it appear to be more difficult to build consensus. So here are all the numbers. 2023 budget, starting with general fund revenue. General fund revenue is broken down into a variety of categories on the left. You've got the years displayed from 2020 up through projected 2023. And there are a number of percentage changes. Obviously, the sales tax, again, that is from a projected, I believe that's a projected number in 2022. And so 21% there in sales tax, the property tax at 7.6, and you can read the percentages as we go down the line. Overall, this particular general fund portion of the budget is up 12.6% over the 2022 estimated budget. General fund revenue is depicted here in this pie chart. Now, for every budget presentation I've done in the past, I have given a little spiel on how we have too much of our general fund revenue in sales tax, and we should be paying attention to the other revenue sources to make sure, for example, that our rates and charges are staying current and so on. Well, that was immediately interpreted to mean that we were going to raise taxes on everyone, but I'm proud to say, at least I think I'm proud to say, that sales tax portion of general fund revenue has gone over the past 5-6 years down from 44% of the general fund revenue to 42%. So that's going in the right way. I'm not unrealistic to think we're going to bring it down to equal that of property tax, but this is just an idea for you to see where the revenue comes from. The general fund expenses, these are up as well. Of course, every department, every line on these next couple of sheets I'm going to show you have dealt with the effects of inflation and specifically labor costs. Labor, there's a bit of a bidding war going on between entities both in the private and public sector. We're all trying to keep our wages and benefits relevant and attractive enough to keep people here. But as you know, we are competing with private sector and other public sector entities. And that means that when they leave here, with the hiring issues that we've had, it makes it very difficult to replace those employees. So we see a number of increases here. Now, I did email the City Council a summary of the notable increases in percentage for this budget, and I'm making that same email available to the media as well, so that you can understand what's being done within these particular budgets. There are a small handful of additional employees, most notably, I think, in the Public Works Department. This is one department that is affected by the growth. The workload is directly affected by the number of new projects, new streets, new subdivisions, and so on. And so then we have our typical, I mean, they're not typical, but we have fairly consistent increases in police and fire. Parks, there's a few new employees in that budget as well. And then community investments, or where the subsidies are, that item is up as well. So you can see here, and there's a couple of asterisks here on this chart. One is for the police department budget for 2023, and that's just to remind me to let you know that this budget's now divided into two unequal parts. One is the general police budget, and the other one is the police grant expenditures. So those are included in this number as well. The other asterisk is for the library, and that is to remind me to tell you that this figure of $3.7 million also includes the $400-some thousand contribution from the Pennington County Commissioners to enable county residents to use our library services as well. So it shows up as an expense on that side of the budget, but there's also a corresponding revenue on the revenue side that's of equal value. And then in the finance, the large increase there has to do, again, with staffing, but primarily to do with the addition of a grants management department, or a division, I'm sorry, grants management division. And this will be a division within finance where they will, we will seek to do two things: to take existing grant workload burden from other departments where appropriate, and then also to solicit new grants, because it's the common belief among directors at this point is that we are not applying for grants that we qualify for, because we do not have the personnel to apply for and manage and conduct the compliance for those grants. So that's what this small work group will be doing. And the funding for this group within that finance department will come from the allowable administrative portion of that grant award. So there's there's a corresponding revenue indicating that on the revenue sheet. So, moving on. City Hall maintenance, that's a program that was just started in 2020 when we took over full possession of this building from the school administration. The Pennington County Care Campus costs are up. You might imagine that the usage of the detox and the other resources there are up, and this is one of the operations where we share expenses with Pennington County. And then along that same line, the Emergency Services Communication Center, or police dispatch, that number's up about 10%. And those folks have done an incredible job of keeping that budget as tight as possible in the past, and they're in the same boat as everyone else with employees and rising costs and so on. Dispatch is funded in some large part by the 911 surcharge that we all pay on our phones, and then for the leftover, that cost is divided proportionately among the dozens of users of that service, and Rapid City is the largest user, so we have the largest portion, about 2/3% of the unfunded portion after the surcharge. Emergency management's one of those budgets that goes up and down depending on their priorities and projects for the year. Search and rescue has requested less from us this year than in the past. Humane Society continues to go up 3%, and that is there's a contract that will need to be renewed with the Humane Society for a contract for services for animal control. Working Against Violence and the Doll and the Rapid City Arts Council costs are both up. And economic development, $250,000. Those are operational dollars that go to Elevate, and then the Black Hills Council local governments. The Journey Museum, another entity that has really tried hard over the years to keep that budget as low as possible, and this year they couldn't hold on to that and have increased 13.7%. With all the homeless population and the difficulties that we're seeing, I've upped the allocation to the Cornerstone Rescue Mission. Senior centers are the same. Lifeways, which teaches kids about drugs and alcohol and how to avoid them in our schools, and early childhood connections. These are the same. And this year I've added the Front Porch Coalition. So Front Porch Coalition wrote a letter asking to be considered in the budget. They had been a part of our budget in the past and were taken out. The reason that I added them this year is that I've seen an amazing transformation in this organization. They are partnering with healthcare providers. They're doing more community outreach than I've ever seen from this group before. They're raising funds, and they're providing an essential service, and that is to care for, not only to bring attention to suicide, but to care for and provide service to those surviving family members. So there's a great service being performed there, one that I would say is an essential service at this point. Performing Arts and the Arts Contingency Fund remain unchanged from last year. Now, Journey On and the Volunteers of America, you see some substantial increases here. I'm going to go to this next slide and I'll explain more on that. But the total general fund budget, $80,870,000, which is up 13.5%. About in line with the increase from 2021 to 2022. So on to those Journey On and Volunteers of America. First of all, I want you to just reiterate for anyone listening that Journey On and Volunteers of America is really an experiment for us. We, as a city, decided to partner with these nonprofit organizations. We did not know what the effect would be. We did not know how sustainable it would be. And so I had built some expectations in my mind that I thought we might be able to see in a year or two. These groups brought about those results in a matter of a few months. And this experiment has worked out better than any experiment I've ever been involved with. So this pays some significant dividends. Journey On, in the first 6 months, has responded to 4,325 calls for service that were diverted from the Rapid City Police Department. Using a very basic cost analysis, this saves the Rapid City Police Department, the City of Rapid City, $592,000, almost $600,000 in personnel and other resources. That's incredibly significant. Journey On also responded to numerous other calls for service, not necessarily police-related, and provided transportation and other services to the homeless, and according to their analysis, has averted 1,100 ambulance calls and transports. That saves the Rapid City Fire Department and the users of the ambulance service $504,000 in personnel and other resources. These are significant savings. So Volunteers of America is the casework and emergency housing component. They are doing casework on homeless individuals that have been identified that have a desire to get out of that group or that have shown some ability to improve their situation or desire to improve their situation. So there's case management there, and they also handle the emergency housing component for us. So with the great success of Journey On, that left the Volunteers of America really understaffed and really without the ability to case manage all that are available for this. So I am proposing that we up these budgets to continue this experiment for the savings of not only for the Rapid City taxpayers, but there now are success stories that I get at least weekly emails on, if not daily, about people who have been taken off the streets, connected with better resources, family, whatever the case may be, and there is some success being made here. And I'm just going to be honest with you, I've went years in my career at times without hearing of a single success story. So this is working. So the total savings just in these two entities, $1.1 million. And that's just a financial calculation. The real savings here is the availability of these services for our citizens. Some people who would have their car broken into or have some kind of a need for a police officer, maybe an automobile accident or whatever it might be, we're waiting for police officers to get free from the calls, from the homeless calls they were on. It was overwhelming, and it really had bogged down the system. So this provides better service to the taxpayers. And now we see the general fund expenses. This is how the general fund portion of this budget is being spent this year. It's broken down by the percentage, the proportion. See, public safety is about at 51.2% of all general fund spending. Next, we have public works at 18%, and this is just the administration side of public works. This is not infrastructure and capital projects, but this is the engineers and other administrative functions. Then Parks and Rec, 11.25, and you can see the breakdown here. So here's another way to look at it. This slide isn't completely essential for you for decision making, but if you just look at the three bars on the left and ignore the other bars for a moment, you'll see that in public safety over 3 years, the priority of that public safety has taken in the general fund spending has gone from 48.8% to 51.2%. So as you can imagine, that has reduced the priority of some other general fund operations. And then we can see it down here if you look at the other bars. Public Works has gone down a full percentage point. Now, that doesn't mean the budget's declining. The budget is, there's still more money available in Public Works, for example. It's just that without the increase in public safety and human services and some of these other areas, there would be more money available to keep that 19% priority for Public Works. But it's gone down a point. Parks and Rec has gone down 1.5 points. Administration has actually gone up a little bit, but that's not just the mayor's office. Administration is the mayor's office, the city council, the city attorney, human resources, information technology, finance, city hall, maintenance. So there's a lot of operations there, and there's some budget growth within some of those areas. But then we see the library has gone down a point. Community development has gone down a quarter point, but it's maintained itself in the last 2 years. And then human services is starting to go up, and pretty substantially compared to other years' growth. The enterprise funds. The enterprise funds are those city operations that make all of their operating revenue through either grants or fees for service. And the monument, formerly the Rushmore Plaza Civic Center, that budget is up, and they are still getting used to understanding the effect of the new Summit Arena on that operation. And so that money is accounted for in their revenue projections. The fire department ambulance service is projecting an increase of 17%. Rapid City Regional Airport is essentially flat, but it's actually down 1.3%, and that budget is a little inconsistent from year to year because it has a lot to do with which approved projects are on tap and the allotment of federal aviation money that's coming in and so on. And then under Parks and Recreation, Meadowbrook and Executive Golf. Meadowbrooks and Executive Golf courses have always operated, almost always operated at a loss. And because of that, they were in the general fund up until a few years ago when this city council authorized putting them in the enterprise funds. And that was a good move. Now we have, under new management, we have both of them operating in the black. So that's good for those organizations and good for the community. More enterprise funds, solid waste collection and disposal, and material recovery. Those are all, that is all based on growth and the expansion of those operations. The solid waste capital projects as well as up. Water production, projecting a 9.5% increase. Water reclamation, a little bit of a decrease, and that's because they're preparing for a major infrastructure project where they're going to have some debt service, and I'll get to that in just a minute as well. The total enterprise funds, $94.2 million. The other category, which special revenue, internal service funds, which is, I can't keep all this straight. If you really want to know, ask Pauline or Tracy, but this is the Vision Fund and all sorts of special revenue funds that the city manages as well. For the grand total, enterprise and general fund budget of $219,056,876 for a 7.2% increase. Infrastructure spending, capital improvement, streets is up. Urban systems, that's also streets, is up. Water infrastructure is up. Water reclamation, again, down a little bit because of their preparation for the bottom line here. Stormwater is very consistent, and coincidentally or not, I just had a meeting today, and there are needs out there in stormwater that are really, they're hard to meet on $1.3 million a year. Parks infrastructure is up just a little bit. So to the normal infrastructure spending for 2023 is estimated to be $32,572,000, and then the wastewater treatment facility, that will come from grants and loans, and that'll be a $145 million project. So that's some pretty significant infrastructure. The opportunities out there, we're still a hot housing market. Elevate Rapid City is working hard. The incubator is up and running. They just announced their daycare grant program. There's a significant daycare provider shortage in Rapid City, and that affects our workforce as well. They're trying to get interest from private individuals and those looking to start a business to get into the daycare business. Block 5, the development on the 500 block of St. Joseph Street is set to break ground in September. Ellsworth personnel are going to begin ratcheting up in 2025. We'll see about 200 new personnel per year from 2025 for the next 15 or 16 years following that. And that'll be in support of the B21 project. There continues to be an influx of young professionals coming into the area. Downtown living is as popular or more popular now than ever. A lot of folks looking at that Block 5 development to get on that list. And there are currently dozens of new companies considering locating to Rapid City. And for me, I'm not in economic development. Tom Johnson can speak to this himself, but as an observer, I believe that outside companies are doing a better, more thorough job investigating communities. They're doing more research. They're very careful about it. So at any given time, Elevate Rapid City has dozens of business prospects on the line and are working with them, pointing them to resources, connecting them with important individuals or companies here in Rapid City. And that includes several national chain retailers and restaurants as well. And another good thing for now is that Rapid City seems to be typically insulated from the worst effects of a recession. And I'm not trying to start an argument here, but the recession is expected. The degree of it will vary with everyone's opinion, but typically when that happens, we've not seen the massive changes that some of the coastal cities have seen. So this is the presentation of the budget. There's about 12 minutes before we start the city council meeting, and Darrell needs a few of those minutes to get set up. So I would take any questions the council has. I understand Pat Jones wants to speak on the phone.
I see nobody else in queue, so
No, I was just asking to make sure that everyone speaks in the microphone because it's very hard to hear. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Okay,
Richie Nordstrom has some questions, Mayor.
okay.
Thank you for the presentation, Mayor. What I'm considering here is I've got 1, 2, 3, about 4 different items. Would you mind if I send them by email to you and we can perhaps discuss them on the 17th?
That would be the best way to keep me accountable to your questions. If you were to send me those questions, and then I'll be here with some other staff members to answer those questions, if not before, on that night. But yeah, I'd be happy to.
Thank you. I yield.
Thank you, Richie. Mr. Solomon?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the budget and explanation behind it. Appreciate you and all the staff who've worked hard on that. No doubt about it, the growth brings opportunities and challenges, and that's certainly reflected in the budget. One of those, obviously, public safety is taking up a huge chunk of this. So my question for you is, does that investment into public safety take into consideration future growth or existing population?
That's a good question. The goal that we're trying to reach now with public safety staffing is to get these police officers who are currently employed down to the average call for service load of an American police officer. They are now currently about double that call load. So as my desire is for the police department to continue to grow every year to try to get caught up. And once we are caught up, I think we'll see a significant change in how public safety services are delivered. But so yes, it is considering future growth, but we are growing that department as fast as possible. And with the hiring difficulties, that's just not very fast at this moment. We added 12 police officer positions into the 2022 budget, 6 more into the 2023 budget, but there are a number of openings at the department and they're having difficulty filling them. So, but I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, we've over the year we've talked about making sure that we have enough officers for the growth that we will have. Of course, the challenge that we have is what you mentioned is the workforce scarcity. The other interesting note, there's quite a few, but one of them was the savings that organizations like Journey On have provided for public safety. So are we to say that the $1.1 million in savings that's between Journey On and VOA, that would have been included in the public safety budget had it not been for those organizations?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know that an additional $1.1 million would have been added, but certainly all of those calls would have been, the priority of other calls for service would have been diminished as well. So the answer to an increasing, constantly increasing workload is constantly increasing that budget and employees. So hopefully this is a way to help us get leveled out here at some point. And just seeing the numbers for Journey On and VOA, I think that's a great benefit, and we're gonna get to that point sooner than if we had not had them.
Okay, and last question, briefly. It is challenging when you're budgeting to determine income for a year that hasn't existed yet, so I can appreciate that. When you projected revenues, did you put that recession in mind? Even though we won't dip perhaps as much as other areas, it will have some sort of impact, maybe slow the growth or affect our sales tax revenue, something along those lines. Did you factor that in, or did you just kind of plug it in as if it's a normal year?
Well, I would say yes and no. I mean, it's factored in that the finance director projects revenue very conservatively. There are essentially no risks being taken in projecting that revenue. But yet, when we budget for expenses, we budget very liberally, and by that I mean every position being filled for 12 months and so on. So there is a protection built in. But right now, the data, there's not significant data to urge us to cut back based on some pending event that hasn't happened yet. And when it does happen, because I'm guessing it probably will, may not happen here to the extreme it would elsewhere. But through the budget supplement process and through your regular lawmaking duties, we can always go back and check this budget mid-year and every month if you want. And when this event happens and it starts to impact, we can make real-time changes at that time. So we're in a very safe position.
Okay, thank you. I yield.
Thank you, Mr. Solomon. Seeing nobody else in the queue, I would entertain a motion to acknowledge the mayor's presentation. Motion by Solomon, second by Roberts. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion to adjourn by Roberts, second by Stroman. All in favor?
Aye.
And we're adjourned.